Thank you, Speaker. I also rise to speak on trains and an issue that is of great concern to the Newtown electorate, which is public transport and train station accessibility. The ability to access our train network should be a basic right for every individual, and it is a disgrace that in 2022 there are some stations in our electorate and throughout New South Wales that remain inaccessible. People with disabilities, parents with prams, the elderly and anyone with mobility issues should not have to struggle to access public transport, facilities that are paid for by the public and are there for the public good. It is outrageous that station accessibility is still an issue today. The disability standards for accessible public transport issued under Division 2A of the Commonwealth Disability Discrimination Act in 1992 legislated standards for what constitutes accessibility and has existed in Australia since 2002. 20 years ago. These standards had goals that were well within the means of successive governments to achieve, but we are now almost halfway through 2022, the year by which there is supposed to be 100% compliance under the disability standards for accessible public transport in the Commonwealth Disability Discrimination Act. 20 years later, we're supposed to be at 100% compliance, and I can tell you now, we are nowhere near that with our train station accessibility in this state. And this is a disgrace that lays barely on, the blame for that lies squarely on successive governments that have failed to invest in our public transport system. It seems that we can pay billions of dollars for polluting motorways, but we are still unable to commit to 100% accessibility upgrade to our train stations. In the electorate of Newtown, we currently have 8 stations: Newtown, Redfern, Stanmore, Erskineville, St Peters, McDonaldtown, Petersham and Lewisham. Ensuring that every single one of these stations was accessible was a high priority for us, and one that we have worked collaboratively with the community on for many, many years. When I was first elected in 2015, only one station was accessible in the electorate of Newtown, and that was Newtown Station. Successive governments had ignored our community's public transport access needs. 7 years later, I am pleased to report that we have seen a massive improvement. The completed upgrade of Petersham Station now means that it is fully accessible, and upgrades to install lifts for the outdoor platforms are underway in Redfern, Erskineville and St Peters, and plans for lift upgrades have also been released for Stanmore. That is a significant improvement. From 7 completely inaccessible stations to now only 2 that will remain inaccessible. Accessibility at the Petersham Station came about thanks to a strong community campaign. Hundreds signed petitions, and together we got local stories in local papers and kept the pressure on the Transport Minister every day in Parliament. Many local residents, including Chris, have expressed much gratitude and appreciation. Chris wrote, "As someone with a disability living in Petersham, the upgrading of Petersham Station will open up my world and allow me to access the community more easily." The same goes for the numerous parents and elderly residents that have contacted us about the steep steps at Stanmore and Erskineville that they have had to navigate. But after much advocacy and community campaigning, it is so great to see that there has been a change. Similarly, in Redfern, years of campaigning by local community and stakeholder groups, including Lift Redfern, Red Watch, and Reconnect Redfern, have resulted in works being underway to finally make Redfern Station from platforms 1 to 10 accessible with new lifts and a new concourse. And while these works are very welcome, sadly, classic Liberal national government style, the failure to consult adequately and listen to the community has meant that some local residents and some community members are very concerned about the design that is being delivered. And sadly, apparently we're going to make Redfern almost accessible because platforms in 11 and 12, the ones that are underground, have been forgotten, and apparently the escalators that are in those are acceptable to be accessible standards, which I think anyone in a wheelchair would agree is not an adequate solution. In terms of Erskineville, I want to give a massive shout out to the Friends of Erskineville who have worked hard to see Erskineville Station upgraded and finally see the plans which will see a second station entrance with lifts connecting the new footbridge at Bridge Street with station platforms and a new lift from the existing concourse onto platform 1. After much action from local residents in St Peters, we are also seeing upgrades to the St Peters station, and Stanmore Station finally have plans in place with planning approval granted after years of community support and calls for an upgrade after seeing students and people with bikes carrying them up and down the stairs through Stanmore. So as I've outlined here, there has been some action finally needed, and I have been so pleased to be able to work with our community to ensure that we have seen a massive increase in the accessibility of our station. stations. However, we are committed and determined to work with the residents near and around Macdonaldtown and Lewisham to ensure that those communities have their calls for accessible stations to be heard.